Hello students, welcome back. This is Dr. Mercado speaking. This is Accounting 1303, Introduction to Accounting 1, and this is a continuation of Chapter 4, which deals with journalizing and posting transactions. Now in this particular lecture, we're going to be covering Problem 411, which deals with correcting entries. Okay, you will find that errors are made. Sometimes, incorrect entries are posted. They're either posted for the incorrect amount, to the incorrect account, so on and so forth. A couple of months later or days later, or time passes by and an error is found. Okay, what do we do about it? Well, we need to correct it in our books. Okay, and in accounting, there's no erasing, there's no using whiteout. You know what? We need to make a correcting entry. Okay, and that is what we're going to be working on and focusing on problem 411. Now, why am I taking the time to cover this with you? Because something like this will be on your test. Okay, so make sure we pay extra close attention and we understand what is happening. Okay, so you are going to have a problem dealing with correcting entries on your test. It is very important that we understand and know how to process correcting entries. Okay, so let me jump over to the problem. There's 3 correcting entries that are going to occur. It says, assuming that all entries have been posted, prepare correcting entries for each of the following errors. Okay, so depending on the company that you work for, I know I used to work for a bank. I was the manager. I was responsible for overseeing one of my responsibilities was overseeing the entire accounts payable department. I was the person responsible for reviewing every single invoice that got paid, making sure proper authorizations were received, making sure everything was coded correctly, processing the actual payment, printing the actual checks, signing the actual checks, and mailing them out. Okay, that was one of my so many job responsibilities. Okay, so I was managing the accounts payable department, and I had a lot of entries to review. And tons of invoices were coming in left and right, and a lot of those invoices had to be separated into so many different branches, so many different departments, different allocation methods need to be employed. It was a lot of work. Okay, and you know what? I couldn't see every single thing that my 12, 13 employees were doing. So once in a while, I would be reviewing general ledgers and I would find mistakes. Okay, mistakes that had been done the prior period, 1 or 2 or 3 months ago, or were just done this week. Okay, so those errors needed to be fixed. Okay, I like to bring up the errors to my employees, not to reprimand them, but just to make them aware of the error that was made, and also make them responsible for correcting it. Okay, I want to see that my employees understood what they were doing. Okay, that they were not just data entry people, that they were just doing whatever was done the prior month, that they actually understood what was happening in that particular transaction. So when I identified an error, instead of me just fixing it, which was the simple way of doing it, I would call in the employee and I would use it as a learning experience. I would explain, okay, I was reviewing general ledgers and I found this. Can you tell me what is wrong in this transaction? And then I would have the conversation with the employee. Okay, now how are we going to fix it? Okay, I need you to go back to your desk, prepare a correcting entry, and bring it over to me so I can review it and sign it. Okay, and in the so many instances that I had with my different employees, sometimes I found out that they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't understand why a correcting entry was needed. And that served as professional development so I could be able to explain it to them, clarify any questions that might have. And that way, in the future, when they were doing these types of transactions, hopefully it would make them understand better and prevent future errors from occurring. Okay, so learning how to correct errors is super important. So let's look at the first transaction we have. Now in this particular case, they're not giving us any dates. So for the date, I'm just going to put transaction 1, 2, and 3, okay? So there is no dates provided. So I'm just going to do transaction 1. Okay. I'm going to do general. No, it should be text. There we go. Okay. So, transaction number 1. It says, the following entry was made to record the purchase of $700 in supplies on account. So what we were doing here? Here we were purchasing supplies on account. So the first thing that we need to identify, which two accounts should be affected. Well, if we were buying supplies, then supplies would have increased. If we were buying them on account, then we would have to set up an accounts payable. Okay? That's what should have happened. Okay? We purchase supplies. Supplies get debited for the 700. We bought them on account, which means we owe the money. Whenever we owe money, it's under accounts payable. That should have been credited 700. But look at what the accountant did. The accountant debited supplies for 700, but then he credited cash for 700. Nowhere in the transaction did they mention that the payment was done with cash. It says that the payment was done on account. So the error here is that the cash account was used instead of the accounts payable account. Supplies is correct. Supplies should have been debited $700. Why? Because you've got more supplies now. Your supply increased by $700. How do you increase supplies? By debiting. So supplies is correct. The mistake is that we credited cash. Cash should not have been involved. So how am I going to fix it? Well, whenever you want to fix something that should not have happened, you do the opposite. You're going to reverse that transaction. So I know cash should not have been credited. Okay, so if I want to cancel that transaction, what do I need to do? I need to reverse it out, which means I have to do the opposite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to debit cash for 700. Okay, let me do a little T account here just so we can see the effects of the transaction. Okay, so let me just make this a little bit bigger, the font, Arial. Let's do 14. Okay, so let's look down here at cash. So what happened here? That was the incorrect entry. So this is the error. Okay, for $700. I want to get rid of this error. How do I get rid of it? Well, now I'm going to debit cash $700. Okay, this is the correcting entry. Okay, so now my balance on my cash account is going to be 0. Okay, so the error was posted for a credit of 700. Now I'm doing a correcting entry of cash, debit 700, and now my cash account is going to have a 0 impact. Okay, so this I didn't want cash to be affected. So how do I reverse the entry that I had done? Well, you do the opposite. So that's what we're doing on the correcting entry, and now my cash account has a 0 impact. Okay, now what should have happened? Okay, what account should have been credited? Well, it says here that the supplies were purchased on account. Whenever we buy something on account, we go ahead and we credit account payable. Okay, 700. Okay, and then here we do, sorry about that. To correct error in which a purchase of supplies on account was credited to cash. Okay. So my supplies entry was originally posted correctly. I'm not going to touch that one because that's correct. The only thing I'm touching is the account that was credited in this particular case incorrectly, which was cash. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reverse that entry that was done incorrectly. I reversed it up here, and then I posted the correct entry, which was your accounts payable should have been credited. Okay. So whenever you're fixing an error, identify what was done right, what was done wrong. whatever was done right, you leave it as is. What you're going to focus on fixing is what was done wrong. Okay? That is transaction 1. Okay? Now transaction 2, I'm sorry about that. Let me see. Transaction 2 says, the following entry was made to record the payment of $450 in wages. So we are paying our employees $450, okay? So what are we doing? We are paying wages. What was actually posted? Rent was posted, okay? So it clearly says that we are paying $450 in wages, but the accountant posted a debit of $450 to rent expense, which is incorrect. Now cash was credited for $450, which is correct. Whenever we make a payment of some sort, we credit cash. So in this case, cash is correct. The item that is incorrect is my rent expense. Rent expense should not have been debited. It should have been wages expense. Okay? So the first thing is identify what is right, what is wrong. Cash is correct. So we don't need to touch the cash transaction. Okay? What we're going to focus on is the incorrect, which is rent expense was debited. Okay? Rent expense has nothing to do in this transaction. So we debited rent expense $450. And let's do the same thing that we did down here. Okay? But now we're going to do rent expense. Okay? So in this particular case, rent expense was debited. This was the error. Rent expense was debited for $450. I need to reverse out that entry to rent expense. So if I need to reverse it out, you always do the opposite. So rent expense is going to be credited. Okay? $450. So I'm going to credit rent expense $450. This is going to be my correcting entry. Then my effect to rent expense is going to be 0. A $450 debit cancels out a $450 credit, so my balance is 0. Okay? So rent expense gets credited $450 for my correcting entry. Now, what should have been debited? Okay? The account that should have been debited $450 is wages expense. So I'm going to do the correct entry. This is the correct entry that should have happened. Wages expense should have been debited $450. So what am I doing here? I'm debiting the correct account that should have been debited originally, which is wages expense $450. And then I'm crediting the account that I had posted to incorrectly, which was rent expense. So rent expense gets a credit of $450. And then I put a description, which is very important. That way whoever is looking at our journal knows, why are we doing this entry? Well, we're doing this entry to correct an error in which a payment of wages was debited to rent expense. Okay? So that is what's happening there. Okay? So once again, in this particular scenario, we posted an entry to an incorrect account. We have to always reverse out that entry that was posted out incorrectly and then post the correct entry that should have happened. Okay? That is transaction 2. Now transaction 3, okay, is a little bit more challenging. Okay? Transaction 3 says the following entry was made to record a $300 payment to a supplier on account. So we are paying a supplier on account. Okay? $300. Okay? So the first thing that we're doing is, first we have to figure out, well, what should the transaction be? Well, we're paying a supplier on account. I know that I'm paying cash, so cash is going to be credited because I'm going to have less cash now because I am paying my supplier. And my accounts payable is going to decrease, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to debit my accounts payable. So accounts payable gets debited $300. Cash gets credited $300. That is what the entry should be. You debit accounts payable $300, you credit cash $300. Now, what happened? We debited supplies for $100, and we credited cash for $100. So not only are the account incorrect, but the dollar amount is incorrect as well. So for this transaction, we said cash needs to be credited for $300 and accounts payable needs to be debited for $300. Okay? Does supplies have anything to do with it? Nope. Supplies have nothing to do in this transaction. Okay? The person that was working on it, the accountant, must have been tired. Okay? So let's look at this particular transaction. Okay? So we have supplies. This is the account that was used in error. So supplies was debited $100. This is the error. If I want to fix it, then I need to credit supplies $100. And then that way my supplies account balance is going to be 0. My impact to the account is going to be canceled. So I have an error because we debited supplies $100 incorrectly. To fix that, I'm going to credit supplies. Okay, so that's one of the entries. Okay, let's go ahead and let's record that. So supplies is going to be credited $100, which is the amount that it was posted for. Okay, now let's look at cash. We said that we are making a $300 payment to a supplier on account. $300 payment. So how do we pay our suppliers? We pay them with cash. How much cash was the transaction recorded for? We recorded it for $100 when that transaction should have been for $300. So I know that I need to do another transaction to cash for $200. Okay, let me do this entry over here just so we can have an idea of what it should look like. Okay, so let's do cash. Okay, so cash. The error was that we credited it. In this particular case, I'm not gonna have no border. Let me just fix this real quick so we can see what's going on. Okay, so in this particular case, cash got credited $100. Okay, but cash should have been credited for how much? For $300. So my correcting entry is going to be I need to credit the account an extra $200. That way I have a total credit of $300 posted to my cash account. So this is the original entry. This is the correcting entry. Okay, so the original entry was done for the incorrect amount of $100. I'm going to do a correcting entry for $200, and that's going to bring my entry to my correct amount of $300. So that means cash is going, this is my correcting entry, cash is going to be credited $200. Okay. Now, what are we using this $300 in cash for? To pay money we owe. Okay. Whenever we pay someone we owe money to, we debit accounts payable. Okay. So this is the correct account that should have originally been debited. So we should have debited accounts payable instead of supplies. And the correct amount is $300. So accounts payable is going to get debited $300. Supplies, which is an account that should not have been used, is going to be credited $100 to cancel the incorrect entry. And cash is going to be debited for $200 to bring up the balance to $300 because we had already posted an $100 entry prior to this. Okay. Remember, when you are doing any type of transaction in your journal, I always want to make sure that my debits equal my credits. Okay. So I always add up my debit and credit column and make sure that my debits equal my credits. Okay. In accounting, debits must always equal credits. If they don't, then that means there's some kind of mistake somewhere. We need to go back and fix it. Okay. Now, for this one, we're going to put here to correct error in which a $300 payment on account was recorded as a $100 cash purchase of supplies. So we are making that correction there. So it says to correct error in which a $300 payment on account was recorded as a 100 cash purchase of supplies. So this is the correcting entry that must happen. When correcting entries, you need to first, be very comfortable with understanding what the transaction is telling us. Know what the original entry should have looked like, and then be able to identify how am I going to be able to fix it. Which accounts were affected, which accounts were correct and not correct. Remember, you always focus on correcting the incorrect entry. If part of the entry was done correctly, then you leave that part as is. You only touch the transactions that affect the error. Okay? So this is an example of correcting errors. If you have any questions as you're completing your assignment, please let me know, and I can try to explain it. I hope this video helped understand, how to correct not only different accounts that were used, but different dollar amounts that were posted as well in error. Okay, so that is it for exercise or problem 411. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Make sure that you work on your assignments during the week. That way, if you have questions, you can get with me and I can help you out. And that is it for today. Have a great day. Thank you.